just kind of tell you something here. I say, for me, I don't like when people come across with this type of conversation here, how they talk about, certain groups of people in a negative light. I'm going to be here for another night or so, and I'm going to make sure that me and my family avoid being around that dude, because if he feels that way about a certain groups of people because they were born in America and who looks like me, he's definitely going to be thinking the same thing or are thinking the same thing of me.
Say hi. Alrighty. Hello.
This is a subject that I try to avoid a lot in any form of conversation with people, no matter where they're from around the world. I try not to get into these things because sometimes it creates tension. It creates a lot of anger amongst the people who want to talk about these things, and for a lot of us who want to avoid these things. And what am I talking about here? I'm out here in this beautiful place, this beautiful resort with my family. For the first time, we said we're really going to be taking a true Filipino vacation. We're not really going to be just staying around our family, staying in the family home, that type of stuff. We're going to travel around the Philippines, go to different islands, and enjoy ourselves. I just see my wife off with our daughter. My wife's going over to pick up her
Hi, good morning.
mom.
How are you?
She's going to take us shopping,
All right.
pick her up some items and things like that. So I decided to stay back and then enjoy the facility, enjoy some quiet time by myself. So I was sitting down in the lobby.
Hi, young lady.
And
How are
I
you?
was sitting there. I remember seeing this gentleman, having, breakfast with us. He was sitting at a table over there with a couple of other people. And, notice him. Hey, man, listen, I'm a 6'2" brother. He's a 6'3", white gentleman. But anyway, what I'm getting at here, as I was sitting in the lobby, I was contemplating whether I should use the money exchange here in the hotel, or should I just ask my wife when she's out there to just exchange some funds. But I said, no, I'm going to go ahead and do it here in the hotel because the rate was pretty decent. It really was. But anyway, he came on over to me and he said, hey, I saw you with your beautiful family. I can tell that, that girl is yours because she looks somewhat like you. I said, yeah, that's my wife and that is my daughter. And we continued talking about certain things. And then he started picking up on my accent. He said, I knew there was something about you, the way you carry yourself, the way you move about, that I can tell that you weren't, from America originally. I said, well, what do you mean by that? I wasn't really hoping for anything negative coming from this gentleman. But then he said to me, he said, well, I can tell the difference between black Americans and black folks, whether they're from the Caribbean or Africa, because they just move different. I said, how is so? I mean, you're going to come on over there and mess with my train of thought. You're going to bring up a conversation with me. I want to know where your mindset's at, because I want to know how he's really thinking about people, who look like me, whether they are from the Caribbean, Africa, or from America. He said, yeah, well, black Americans, it's just something about them that really kind of rub him the wrong way. Now, he was really feeling comfortable talking like this because, I'm a guy from the Caribbean. So, before he went on any further, I decided I was going to open up my mouth and I was going to stop the conversation real quick. And I said to him, I said, my friend, let me explain something to you about. Let me just kind of tell you something here. I said, for me, I don't like when people come across with this type of conversation here, how they talk about, certain groups of people in a negative light. I said, because there are millions and millions of black Americans in America. And, the way you're describing, black Americans, you're describing black Americans in a way the same way that the media portray a lot of black Americans to be. Lazy, don't want to work, they commit crime. I said, that's just a very small percentage of the people that you see. Now, I really didn't want to say this to him. But I say to him, I said, my friend, now imagine if I had come up to you and said, well, you know something? I can tell that you weren't from Europe because of the way you move. You move in a way that is negative because, white Americans, it's just something about them that just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I said that to him. So he looked at me and said, what do you mean? I said, well, I kind of find, most people would say they find European a little bit more refined, but they find American, white folks to not be that way. So he looked at me and says, that's a bad thing to say. I said, my man, exactly. Look at how you started the conversation with me knocking black Americans. How do you think I was going to take that? Do you think because maybe I was born in the Caribbean that I was going to go along and agree with what you're saying? So I started getting into some conversation. I started explaining things to him. I said to him, listen, man, you will never ever hear me knock black Americans for anything. Because as a man who was born and raised in the Caribbean and came to live in America, I said I wouldn't be able to do the things that I'm doing if it wasn't for black Americans making the sacrifice, doing the things that they did back in the day to make it easier for people like me and every other group of people who's coming abroad from overseas to come into America and reap the benefit of all the rights that we have living in America. I said, America allowed me to be able to do the things that I'm doing here with my family. It was black Americans that opened the door for me to come in and to be able to do this. So I said, how do you think it would be for me to knock my brothers and sisters? And I said, you're my brothers and sisters too, man. You're a white man, but I consider you to be my brother. But I don't understand the concept of how you think about a certain groups of people. I said, if somebody did something to you wrong, I say, you hold it towards that individual. You don't try to throw it on the whole race. I mean, I gotta give him credit. He sat there, he listened to me, he heard what I gotta say. There was so much more said. But after the conversation was said and done, he looked at me and said, something, you're right. I never really thought about it that way. I always look at things in just a one-track mind way. I always think of certain groups of Americans, they find reason not to want to go out and do things. They find reason to complain about the reason why they're not advancing in life. They find reason to not want to do so. I say, yeah, but how many out of those millions of people do you really know who doesn't do that? He said, truly, I don't know. Because his mindset is just going from the few people that he sees. I asked him, I said, where he's from? He said he's from Mississippi. I said, come on, man. You should know better about that. I said, you know what Mississippi was really about? I said, you know what Mississippi is still about? I said, so if you do find certain groups of people out there who are struggling and living in the condition that they're living in, I say, you know the reason why that they are still living in those conditions. Now, I'm not making excuses for anyone claiming that they can't go out and do whatever they need to do to make themselves better. But as soon as I said that to him, he turned around, he said to me, he said, you know something? I appreciate having this conversation with you. He said, from now on, I'm going to start looking at things in a different way. But his whole mindset, like he said, is coming from watching certain news programs, because these are the things that they push out there about certain groups of people, especially black Americans. And, I said, it is wrong. It is really wrong for you to feel that way. And I say, if you really think about it, all the negative things that you're talking about black Americans, I say you can talk about the same thing for a lot of white Americans. So the conversation ended. It ended in a very positive way. It ended in a nice way. But I can tell you this, man. I'm going to be here for another night or so. And I'm going to make sure that me and my family avoid being around that dude, because if he feels that way about a certain groups of people because they were born in America and who looks like me, he's definitely going to be thinking the same thing or are thinking the same thing of me. And I hate to kind of bring up these conversations here on such a beautiful vacation out here with my family. But I say, you know something? I'm here to share my story. I'm here to share this adventure that I'm out here on. And any little thing that I feel might be interesting for me to share with my audience, I'm gonna do it. It is wrong, man. I don't look at white people no any different than how I look at anybody else. I love everyone, man. We're people. We're all the same. We all have good and bad in every race. So we just shouldn't look at a certain group of people and pass judgment on them. It is wrong. But anyway, you guys know what it is with me. It is always peace and love. Hopefully you guys listen to that conversation while I'm out here walking the grounds out here at the Shangri-La Resort. I feel, this video here, I'll use the footage to talk about this conversation here, just to enlighten this heavy load that I have on my chest, carrying around after talking to that brother. But anyway, you guys always know what it is with me, man. It is always peace and love, man. Peace and love. Peace on out.